Welcome to Crime Scene X. Today's video will cover 3 road trip horror stories. Before the stories begin, I want to say thank you to all my subscribers. I am just starting out with this channel, and it's great to have support from all of you. Enjoy the video. I've always loved a good road trip. There's something exhilarating about the open road, the hum of the engine beneath you, the wind rushing past the windows. That was, until my trip through Nevada. There's a long stretch of I-80, dubbed the loneliest road in America, that is by far the most desolate drive you can ever experience. A perfect route for me, an introverted photographer, seeking unique landscapes. It was on that road my nightmare began. One late afternoon, as the sun started dipping behind the distant mountains, I decided to pull over to take some photographs. I spotted a rusty, beaten-up car parked off the road, half hidden in the sagebrush. It was the perfect scene, an embodiment of desolation and time's passage. As I moved closer, I noticed a torn map on the dashboard, a streak of what looked like dried blood across it. An uneasy feeling pricked at my senses, but I shrugged it off as an overly active imagination. With the setting sun as my backdrop, I snapped a few shots before deciding to continue my journey. Later that night, I pulled over to the side of the road to rest. With not a soul in sight, and only the whispering winds and distant howls as my company, I dozed off in the back seat. A sharp rap on the window startled me awake. I squinted at my watch. 3:23 a.m. The knocking came again, insistent, making my heart pound against my ribs. I scrambled up, peering out into the inky darkness. A man stood outside, hunched and gaunt, bathed in the harsh glow of my headlights. He gestured towards his mouth and mimed drinking, pointing towards my half-empty water bottle in the cup holder. Swallowing hard, I unlocked the door, handing him the bottle. His ice-cold hand brushed against mine as he took it. His hollow eyes never left mine as he drank, his gaze searing into me, making me feel like a specimen under a microscope. After what felt like an eternity, he handed back the empty bottle, his mouth twisting into a grotesque grin, revealing few remaining rotten teeth. He gestured towards the back of my car, then mimed sleeping. "No, I need to leave," I stammered, gesturing towards the driver's seat. His grin widened as he took a step back, allowing me to slip into the front. As I sped off, I glanced in my rearview mirror, my blood running cold as I saw him standing in the middle of the road, still grinning as he slowly waved goodbye. For the remainder of the night, I drove in fear, my heart pounding every time my headlights swept over an unfamiliar shape. I was desperate to find civilization, a beacon of safety, but the road seemed to stretch on forever. Hours later, as the sun began to peek over the horizon, I reached a small town. As I pulled into a diner, relief washed over me. Yet when I looked at my passenger seat, I found the empty water bottle covered with the same dried, reddish-brown substance I saw on the old map earlier. That was my last road trip. Now, every stretch of deserted road is a reminder of the loneliest and most terrifying road trip of my life. My wife Jane and I had always been adventurers, eager to explore every corner of our magnificent country. So when I suggested a road trip through the Badlands of South Dakota, she was excited. As we entered the rugged terrain, vast canyons and towering spires, we were in awe of the desolate beauty surrounding us. We set up camp at a secluded spot, the silence only broken by the rustling wind and the occasional hooting owl. On the second day, Jane decided to stay back at camp while I set off to explore more distant regions. I spent the day marveling at the wonders of nature, but as I started back, I realized I had lost track of time and direction. I wandered for hours, my GPS unresponsive, my frantic calls to Jane going unanswered. As the sun began to set, I saw a flicker of light in the distance. Relief washed over me as I stumbled towards it, only to come upon an old, run-down trailer, its windows glowing with dim light. Desperate, I knocked, and a woman answered. She was an older woman, with lines of age and wisdom etched into her face. Her eyes were a striking shade of blue, almost unnerving in their intensity. I explained my situation, and she kindly let me use her phone. My call to Jane went to voicemail again, and I left a message explaining where I was. The woman, seeing my distress, offered me a spare room for the night. As I lay in the room, I noticed newspaper clippings tacked to the wall. Each headline spoke of the majestic landscapes and the beauty of the Badlands, which was now far from my perception. The isolation of the place began to seem threatening rather than tranquil. In the morning, I thanked the woman and made my way back to the campsite. My heart pounded in sync with each crunch of gravel under my boots, the weight of dread growing heavier with every step. When I finally found our campsite, it was empty. The absence of Jane felt like a physical blow. Her favorite blanket, the one with the sunflowers, was lying crumpled on the ground. Our food supplies had been knocked over, a couple of tins rolling away into the brush. The campfire had long since died out, cold ashes the only testament to the warmth that was once there. Her favorite book lay abandoned, pages fluttering in the wind. But Jane, my Jane, was nowhere to be found. I felt my knees buckle and I fell to the ground, clutching at the dirt. Her laughter echoed in my ears. The image of her wide smile against the backdrop of the vast Badlands was burnt into my retinas. Every shared whisper under the stars, every shared adventure, every shared dream seemed to dissolve into the harsh wilderness. The landscape we had admired together now seemed barren and cruel. Its beauty turned into an unforgiving harshness. I called the police and they arrived with a search and rescue team. The days blurred together as they searched the Badlands, helicopters whirring above and dogs sniffing the ground. They combed through the wilderness, under every rock, behind every hill, along every path we may have trodden. But Jane had vanished, leaving behind a ghost of our shared memories. They suggested she might have wandered off, got lost and succumbed to the elements. They spoke words meant to console me, but they bounced off, unable to penetrate the dense fog of despair that had settled over me. Despite their assurances, my mind spun with horrifying possibilities. Had she been scared? Had she called out my name? Had she waited for me to find her? Each thought was a dagger to my heart, each unanswered question a wound that wouldn't heal. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The search was officially called off, leaving me with a hollow ending to a story that had been filled with so much love and adventure. There was no closure, no goodbyes, only a deafening silence and a desolate campsite. The pain of losing Jane is a relentless gnawing, an abyss of grief that swallows me whole. It's a scream trapped within my chest, a nightmare that plays on an endless loop. The face of the old woman, the deserted trailer, the chilling desolation of the Badlands, they are etched into my memory, serving as grim reminders of my worst nightmare. The road trip with no return, and a life without Jane. The world goes on turning, but for me, it feels like I'm forever stuck in the Badlands, still searching for Jane. The echo of her laughter haunts me, a phantom sound in the back of my mind. Every gust of wind sounds like her whisper, every rustle in the bushes feels like her footsteps. But when I turn around, there's nothing but the vast wilderness staring back, a chilling reminder of the road trip that took Jane away, leaving behind a void no amount of miles can fill. The thrill of the open road was a siren song my friends and I couldn't resist. Lily, Alex, and I had planned a cross-country adventure, a road trip that would carry us across the hidden treasures of our country. Our excitement was palpable as we set out in our sturdy camper van. The initial part of the journey was everything we'd dreamed of: charming small towns, stunning landscapes, and evenings spent recounting stories under the stars. The real adventure began when we veered off the main highway, deciding to explore a forgotten road that stretched through the dense forests of Oregon. The sense of isolation, at first, was exhilarating, a testament to our collective yearning for adventure. But as we ventured further into the depths of the wilderness, a sense of unease began to overshadow the thrill. The usually vibrant forest seemed unusually quiet, the silence broken only by the low hum of the van's engine and our nervous laughter. Our journey came to a jolting halt on the fourth day when our van's engine sputtered and died. Stranded in the heart of the forest with no cell reception and not a soul in sight, our predicament felt more sinister than adventurous. Alex, a decent hand with mechanics, couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. Resigned, we decided to hunker down in the van for the night, hoping for a good Samaritan to find us come morning. As night fell, a dense fog rolled in, turning the already isolating forest into an impenetrable blanket of white. We huddled in the van, anxiety creeping in with the encroaching mist. Then we heard it. Footsteps crunching on the gravel circling our van. Our laughter ceased and we exchanged nervous glances. We sat there frozen as the footsteps stopped. Then came a soft tap against the van, followed by the sound of something sharp dragging across the metal exterior. Panic bubbled within us as the van shook slightly. Then, as abruptly as it started, everything went quiet. Morning broke with a sense of grim relief. Stepping out of the van, we were greeted by a chilling sight. The van bore the scars of the previous night, thin, deliberate scratches etched across the body of the vehicle. Even eerier were the distinct footprints circling our temporary sanctuary, leading off into the forest and disappearing into the mist. With adrenaline fueling our efforts, Alex managed to coax the van back to life by midday. As we drove away from the unsettling quiet of the forest, the weight of our horrifying encounter pressed heavily on us. We reached a small town by evening. As we recounted our experience to the locals, a hush fell over the gathering. The old highway they shared had been the site of several unexplained incidents over the years, the common denominator being a mysterious figure that many had spotted but none could identify. We nervously laughed off their tales, telling ourselves it was just folklore. But the memory of those deliberate footsteps, the chilling scratches on the van, and the terror we felt that night couldn't be dismissed as mere stories. We chose to cut our road trip short, heading home with an experience that would haunt us long after. Every footstep in the quiet of the night, every scrape against a door, takes me back to that forest, back to the unnerving realization that we were not alone. Thanks for watching.